Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Fair Game Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Smith. Today's going to be a good episode because we got two Roberts on board. Today's guest is a service provider in a field that almost none of us think about until we really need to think about it. He's the guy who's quietly behind the scenes who can help save you when you need to be saved. I'm going to go out on a limb here and add that he's also probably the most decorated service member in the entire fair industry, having won multiple awards at state associations. And last year, he won the first ever, the inaugural Associate of the Year award from IEFE. Folks, from Spectrum Weather Insurance, this is Robert Holmes. Welcome to the show, my man.
Well, thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
We were talking before, kind of in our little banter before we started about how we met. And I couldn't remember it because there's, a occupational hazard. You go to so many of the trade shows and conventions. And of course, you're not the guy that goes out to the fair. Like a lot of times, if I'm meeting an entertainer, it might be at a fair, it might be at a convention, who knows? But when you said you remember where we met, my first thought was, oh, I had to have been at a convention, but I didn't remember which one, but you did. Why don't you tell that story?
Well, it was down in Florida, St. Augustine,
Yep.
and we were neighbors at the Florida Federation of Fairs trade show. And I believe they open, did they have like a 90-minute kind of Friday night opening, if I recall? And then the trade show typically goes for several hours on Saturday. But
Yep.
after closing on Friday night, there was a piece of electronic equipment from another vendor's booth that overheated, and we don't need to get into all those specifics, but yeah, there was a fire. And
Yeah.
so yeah, the trade show sprinklers went off and fire trucks showed up, and then the next
It
thing you
was
know,
drama.
the service pro people were there all the next day trying to dry everything out. No trade show that whole entire
Yep.
day.
Yep.
We got
As I recall, it was another vendor had left a laptop charging, which like you don't blame him. I mean, like
right.
we all charge laptops or iPads like every day. We have
Sure.
half a dozen devices that are getting charged, and he just drew the short straw that time, and it happened to short out. It started a fire. I remember they were the trade show had ended, I don't know, at like 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock or something that day, and they were going to do some. I don't think it was it might have been the president's reception. I can't remember exact, but there was going to be an evening event,
Hmm.
and I had arrived, and I was going in because you had to walk past the trade show room where that ballroom was, and literally as I'm at the door from the back of the convention center in St. Augustine, these staff members from the kitchen all come running out yelling, "Don't go in! Don't go in! There's a fire! There's a fire!" And I'm like, they're like hysterical, and I just came from dinner or wherever I was at. I'm like, what? I was so level headed, like, okay. And they're like, no, don't go in. They're like hyperventilating. And then all of a sudden I start to see smoke in the hallway. And I'm like, oh, you don't mean
Yeah,
like you had a fire in the kitchen. You had a fire.
a
Yeah. And
fire. Yep.
oh man, that was such a disaster because I remember uh, Billy, who does the Elvis impersonator, was directly
Yeah.
behind the booth where the fire started, and he took some major damage to his costumes.
Yeah. All
And
custom made.
yeah, man, and Jack from Jack and Oscar, Oscar was in the across from where the fire started. So I remember standing outside in the parking lot with Jack, and he is just like beside himself. He's like, that's like I don't know, 100,000, 150. I don't know what the number is exactly, 100 something thousand dollars on Rock or not Rocket on Oscar. And he's so worried. And we were there waiting and waiting and waiting. And somewhere, I think it was close to midnight, they let some of us snuck back in. Like they fire was out, and the fire marshal come down their investigation, and we kind of snuck into the back, and Jack flipped the switch on, and thank God Oscar powered back up. and everything was good. But man, do you remember when we went back in for like the last day of the trade? They managed to have like one day of trade show.
Yeah, and
And
even just a few hours at that, if I recall.
yeah, and like the Surf Pro did a great job getting that thing cleaned up. And yet everything was squishy because those sprinklers had just like, and I don't think people realize those sprinklers don't just come on and just kind of spray like your garden hose. They have massive pressure behind them to put that fire out. And that carpet was like walking in a boggy swamp.
Yeah, those sprinklers too, the water isn't always clean when it comes out, it's
Yeah,
been
because
sitting in
it's
those pipes a long time, and I
yep,
remember the whole place smelled, it just had this residue of smoke, and you could feel the squishiness
yep.
yet in the carpet. I was blessed that I didn't really have any damage besides kind of the top copy or two of some brochures and
Yeah, I
my
was
little
very, I was
table
lucky because
clothes.
we were both on the far opposite side, and those sprinkler systems are designed to only hit, um, like right where the fire is
Yeah.
detected. So as the fire spreads, more of them would have kicked on, but we didn't have any blowing over top of us. Which is in your case, if you only lose flyers, that's one thing, but for you think about, uh, uh losing the Elvis costumes, or I had Conjure set up there, that's wood. It's like,
Hmm.
and I was very lucky because even over on our side, we probably had about 3/4 of an inch of standing water on our side of the room. Well, Conjurer sits on wheels about 3.5 inches above the ground. So it was like the wheels got wet, but they're metal and rubber. So that was good. And yet,
Perfect.
we managed, as the Florida Federation, we managed to overcome that very giant obstacle, still have a bit of a convention and trade show, and we made life work. Why? Because we're the Florida Federation of Fairs. We don't
Right.
quit. So, well, man, listen, you do weather insurance. This is the thing that when I think about what services fairs need, ticketing, ribbons and awards, entertainment, and that yet you quietly sit in the background, selling insurance, which you don't ever really think about it until you need it. How long have you been in the insurance industry?
Well, I've been doing weather insurance since 2007. I formed a company back then and worked at it for about 3 years. It was under a parent company, and our philosophies did not align.
Okay.
And so I decided to go out on my own and start Spectrum in 2011.
So
And
Spectrum is your company.
it is, yes. My
Got it.
wife and I, Teresa, are the sole owners, officers, etc., employees. So
Got it.
it's just us that kind of manage this whole thing.
So take a minute, if you will, talk a little bit about whether insurance works. I've spoken to some fair managers about it. You and I have talked at a couple of conventions, but in case anybody listening isn't clear exactly how weather insurance policy works, clear that up for them.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I probably it's one of the biggest challenges really is the education, because a lot of times people are looking at they're either doing the same thing they've done for 20 years, or they refer to it as rain out insurance but don't fully understand how things work. And you know, in reality, there are several different options available, and really the correct option depends on your fair and the fair's needs. But a policy is available. The simplest form is just, if it rains a certain amount during a certain time, you get a check. So the claim
Got it.
process is, did it rain enough? Yes or no. If the answer is yes, here's your check.
So is this
Um,
something that like a fair, let's say they know, oh, we've got a busy Friday night. And we want to, you know, if we rains out, we could lose, I don't know, 100 grand, $200,000.
yep.
Is that something where they say we want to buy a insurance policy between, I don't know, 5 and 7 p.m.? Is that the deal?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on, I mean, that's kind of a basic policy, right? We sell lots of usually 4 or 5 hour periods, like a 5 to 9 or something like that. and 10 to 20, $30,000 claim payments. However, the application for, or what type of insurance you're going to need is really dependent on what's your goal. Is it to protect a grandstand event only? Is that your main focus? Or is it really to protect the revenue generated by each person that comes through your gate?
Got it.
Fairs will have, maybe it's a soft ticket grandstand, gate admission gets you into the grandstand, but they also have a beer garden. They also have a carnival split. They may or may not charge for parking. And so they rely on people coming to the fair and going through the gate and then spending money when they get in there. And if it's a rainy evening, you will have less people show up. Those that do show up will spend less money because wet people spend less than dry people, and they will leave earlier. So it's not about an event in a grandstand, you have a concert or something that gets canceled, as much as it is about just protecting that revenue. So we're not talking about rain out. We're talking about just rain that impacts the number of people that show up at the fair. But conversely, you have fairs that might have a large concert, and their focus is protecting that investment in that entertainment, to make sure that if it is not necessarily a rain out, but if there is a forced cancellation of that event, be it for weather or otherwise,
Got it.
uh, that's what they're looking for. And that's a separate policy, a different type of coverage. We call it event cancellation insurance.
Mhm.
And that covers weather and power outages and floods and fires and you name it.
And you offer all of that with Spectrum.
We do, yes. Spectrum is kind of the name, as the name suggests, there's a full kind of line of products, the quiver's full of arrows. I refer to it sometimes as we have different types of policies that I consider Lego blocks, and we can build something to meet your needs, whether it's excessive heat index or, rain insurance. There's 4 different types of rain insurance. And, we have policies just for lightning. And so,
Oh, that's true, especially because like we don't think about that here in New Mexico. Because like, do we get lightning in usually July? You get some afternoon thunderstorms with some lightning, but like Florida, you sneeze and there's been 700 lightning strikes across the state.
correct. And so the type of insurance that one might need in Albuquerque, especially if it's not monsoon season, would be far different than somebody in West Palm Beach
Sure.
or Tampa, which would be completely different than perhaps somebody in Richmond, Virginia, or Minot, North Dakota. They all have their specific geographic and weather issues, but then also the fairs are different. So I like to have the conversation with the fair and say, okay, let's figure out what you're trying to achieve, rather than just do what you've been doing for the last 15 years. Let's figure out what you're trying to achieve, and maybe we can create a better solution to that problem.
Sure. So it's interesting you say it like that, because again, you think weather insurance, you think, well, we're going to buy out Friday night in the event we get rained out and we protect our gate. But didn't I see you post on Facebook a month or so back? There was an event, if I could be mixing this up, but they were requiring ice, like there were going to be ice statues or something like that, and it wasn't cold enough.
Correct.
So the ice was melting, and they had so they didn't, if I understand, they didn't have policy against bad weather. They had policy against good weather.
Yeah, as I recall, I don't believe they had any sort of coverage, but you can absolutely buy coverage for wintertime events that require a certain amount of cold weather. There's places that have ice sculptures, ice mazes, especially up in places like Minnesota,
Sure.
even Canada, that do a lot of these wintertime events that require some degree of cold weather. Last weekend was the pond hockey, World Pond Hockey Championships, that will be held in the Twin Cities. They got canceled. It wasn't cold enough to form enough ice to have the event. As far as I know, they weren't insured either, but that kind of coverage is absolutely available. And not only that, for indoor winter events, we actually provide snow insurance for, the wedding expo, the woman's show, the World of Wheels, we just did a Lucas Oil indoor tractor pull here earlier in the month. And it's all about snowing the day of the event where people
People
don't show
decide not
up.
to come.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's interesting because I think about the first thing that comes to mind is my friend Bob Duck who does the duck races. He's just south of Albuquerque is where he lives, and so we connect every now and then. And for the longest time, this time of year, he's actually up in like Montana or Minnesota or Wisconsin or someplace doing RV and boat shows. Like
Hmm.
apparently, I guess that's a big thing. Like in my mind, because I live in such a mild climate, I imagine that Minnesota just shuts down, but they know how to live with it, right? They got their
Oh, for
plows and
sure.
they know how to make things happen. So that's the type of event where they're like, hey, we've got this annual RV and boat show this weekend, and oh, the day of the event, it snowed 19 inches, and we had to cancel the event. That's the type of thing this policy would cover.
Sure. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's rain is by far the biggest weather peril we insure, but
Yeah.
nearly any measurable weather peril can be insured.
And does
Uh,
that stuff, you think about a place like Florida on the coastlines where hurricanes can be an issue. Is there fine print within those policies that like, did you buy it before the storm was officially named or things like that?
Yeah, if you're buying an event cancellation insurance policy, okay, that's the one, where it covers all kinds of different perils, including things like hurricanes. And not only just the occurrence of a hurricane, but even if there was an evacuation order in place, but you never really got the hurricane or something along those lines, any sort of forced cancellation. But typically with those policies, you have to buy them 2 weeks in advance.
Mm.
And any sort of named storm in, the Atlantic or even identified tropical depression will be excluded if it's named when you buy your policy. The idea is you can't wait until something
Yeah. You can't,
significant forms off the coast of Africa and figure, oh man, my event's coming up in 2.5 weeks. I better buy insurance.
right.
That is what they call
And
a
you can't,
new circumstance.
and you definitely cannot wait until Weather Channel's putting the cone and you're directly in the middle of it. And you're like, maybe I should buy a
That's correct.
policy. So you
Yeah,
would be at that point, you would say you can absolutely buy a policy, but any rain as a result of this storm will not be covered.
that's correct. So you could, if somebody wanted to buy a policy in that regard, the name storm and any sort of soliloquy from that storm, whether it's a tornado spawned or something, is going to be an exclusion. However, as long as you're within 7 to 10 days, depending on carrier, you can still buy just a plain rain insurance policy.
Got it.
Okay, most legitimate insurance carriers will let you buy coverage between 7 and 10 days in advance.
Okay.
And so that's kind of an alternative to a cancellation policy if you wanted to get something where a name storm was already out there.
Got it. Now, somewhere, I don't know, in the last 10 or 12 years, all of a sudden we're starting to see winter snowstorms being named. Now, my in laws live down in South Mississippi, so they had to deal with insurance after Hurricane Katrina. Luckily, it was, I don't even know if they ended up filing claims because I think that most for them, they lost the power box on the side of their house and they just replaced it themselves. But they heard all the stories, all the nightmare stories from State Farm and all these companies that all of a sudden try to make excuses of, oh, well, we're not covering this, that, or the other. The named winter storms seem to start happening after Katrina. Is that something the insurance companies, that industry pushed, or was that like the Weather Channel trying to be dramatic?
That is 100% the Weather Channel marketing team.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no official government list of winter storm names or definitions thereof. As far as a naming convention, it was purely Weather Channel related. And in fact, some news channels, they don't actually refer to the winter storm's name because they're not either affiliated with the Weather Channel or I think CBS parent company owns the Weather
Okay.
Channel. Um, but yeah, that was purely marketing. I have seen, however, one carrier on the event cancellation side that now has a statement that any impacts from a winter storm named, and it actually says named by the Weather Channel, would be an exclusion.
So
So
not NOAA, not any official organization, the Weather Channel. So
that is correct.
is it
That
Jim
is
Cantori gets to decide your insurance policy?
That's it. Well, it's more about the exclusion, right? So you can't
Right.
wait until quote there is a named winter storm, which really shouldn't come into play anyway, because I don't think they've ever named a winter storm more than 3 days before it really started forming.
Sure.
You just don't have that
So
kind of lead
so
time.
this wasn't something that the insurance company said, well, we're going to start naming these storms because then that can change the insurance policies or whatever in our favor. This was strictly for marketing and views and likes and comments on social media. This was Weather Channel saying that.
Exactly correct. Yes.
Those guys. Um, I want to avoid discussion of the pandemic as much as possible in the season of the podcast because, as I've said before on other episodes, I am far past that. With that said, though, given your specific field with insurance, you deal with weather specifically, but post pandemic, are you guys seeing? I mean, you deal with event cancellation insurance. Are there any changes in language regarding pandemic or endemic that you guys are seeing?
Yeah, so the event cancellation insurance is like I said prior, does have coverage for non-weather perils. Prior to early 2020, there was communicable disease coverage. It was something that you could acquire with some additional premium, a very small premium, in fact. Um, and that has since gone away. Across all carriers. So there's now a communicable disease exclusion.
Okay.
That exclusion also applies to the non-appearance of key persons. So it might be a situation where you're going to have an artist come and perform, and as an additional layer of coverage, you add non-appearance by that performer, and that would
So if
typically
that
cover.
if that performer cancels because the lead singer got the flu or got COVID or a band member got COVID and they had to cancel the show, that's where this comes in.
That is now an exclusion.
That's excluded.
Yeah, but it still covers non-communicable disease illness. So accident, illness, death, or unavoidable travel delay. So you could have like appendicitis would be an illness, but it's
Got it.
not communicable. So something like that would be covered.
Okay. And is there an option to purchase some kind of a policy that will cover that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not so if so if you've got $200,000 to bring in a concert and that artist develops COVID and has to cancel, good luck.
Yeah, I think that should be addressed. My advice would be address that in the contract with the
Yeah,
artist, that there would be some sort of either rescheduling possible, come back next
sure.
year, or some sort of refund.
Yeah, so
Because
that's on the contract on the back end
yeah,
there. Got it. Well, that would make sense. So you guys, it's such an interesting field that you work in that you just quietly are there in the background. You pretty much work out of your office. Do you ever make it out to events to go be present, or do you not? Is that not necessary?
I do. It's not necessary, but I do try to make it out just because I really enjoy going to the fair.
Yeah.
So
Well, if they're your clients, it's kind of good to have your face seen there.
it is. It is. We did in 2021. We had our camper. We were heading back from Minnesota on our summer camping vacation, and instead of just coming home, we kind of took a route through eastern Iowa and visited three fairs. And took in a rodeo and stock car race and three concerts. That was a lot of fun.
Nice.
And then last year my wife and I went Wisconsin State Fair for 2 days. Had a lot of fun there. This year, I think we're going to go to the Northern Wisconsin State Fair, and maybe we're kind of planning things out, but we're going to stop at a couple more fairs again this year. And if I'm in town and there's a fair, I'll try to get over there.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I really like, seeing the kids, take care of their animals and, getting out there and showing their animals. Sometimes they're just afraid to go out and show their,
Yeah.
swine or whatever it is, but it builds such character with these kids. And it's something I think that beyond the ag education, which we all need, I think, for youth to have that kind of responsibility is something that is sorely missed in a lot of corners of the country. So, I just enjoy going the sights and the sounds and everything else.
Yeah. When you really dig into the nitty gritty of the industry, there's the general public at large kind of always has their thoughts on and stereotypes on like the carnival operators and what that looks like. And once you get into the industry, you realize there's some really top notch, entertainment providers,
Mhm.
RCS and Ridehofer and Straits. A bunch of them just do such a great job. But when you really dig into what the county fairs are there for, it's not for roller coasters and corn dogs and cotton candy. It's not for the magician or the juggler. It's for that farming and ranching education and supporting, youth livestock stuff. And one of the things I really enjoy is getting along the way when I'm out at the fairs is getting to meet the FFA kids because they are some of the most top-notch kids that I have ever encountered anywhere in this country. If when I see those blue jackets, I know almost everything I need to know about that kid for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. They're going to do well in life.
Yeah.
I mean, they just have that kind of work ethic and responsibility and yeah, it's great to see.
So speaking of doing well in life, last December, IFE decides to start an award for Associate of the Year. See, you're smiling and you're trying to be humble here. It's designed to be an award that honors an outstanding service member in our industry. And you walked away with the inaugural Associate of the Year award. How did that process play out?
Um, well, I got an email actually in late October,
Mhm.
mid-October maybe. And I was informed by the IFE that I was going to be presented with that award. And so I first looked to make sure that the address was correct in the email.
Did you mean to send
I,
that to someone else?
yeah, I mean that I reached out to one of my clients back in late August, a couple of them actually, and said, "Listen, they got this award, and I don't know what it's about as far as how you feel, associate because there's so many wonderful people in this business." I said, "But if you're up for it, and you think I would make a worthy candidate, if you wanted to throw the hat in the ring, so to speak." Um, and both of them told me they've already done that. Um,
Oh,
they've,
nice.
yeah, and then somebody else reached out to me and said, "Hey, I just sent a letter of recommendation," and so I was getting this feedback, and I was like, "Man, that's humbling. It's so nice." And then I got that email in October, to let me know that make sure I was going to be there for starters, and give me some of the details and but I also had to not tell anybody. Well, of course, I told my wife, who then told my children, and then
And then the children put it
next
out
thing,
on TikTok and
no, no, they're really good about that, but they all wanted to be there. They
cool,
all
man.
wanted to go to Salt Lake City, and so they did. I mean, I had two of my three kids there. My mother-in-law came out, and that morning, that Tuesday morning, the trade show it's open for like 2 hours, and then there's the 2 hour general session, which
Right.
they the award, and then 2.5 hours of trade show again. So I go to the trade show that morning. Actually, it was the IFE does like a certified buyer's breakfast too that morning.
Yep. Yep.
And so I'm in a suit and a tie, and people who know me know it's rare to see me in even a jacket, let
Right.
alone a suit and tie. And but nobody really said anything. And
I noticed. I was like, well, that's different, but maybe he's just. My thought is he's just making a good impression on the buyers, I guess.
yeah. Well, so then yeah, I went to the ceremony, the general session, and they took me backstage, and they play the video. Jennifer Giesick went up and kind of announced the award, and I've known Jennifer for quite a while. In fact, we traveled quite a bit this past year. She was IFE chair,
Yep.
and so they play this video of that I didn't know was going to be done. I mean, I knew they were going to do a video, but I had not seen it. And some of the pictures they had on there and some of the information they said, I'm backstage going, oh man, that somebody did a little digging. And so I then they
Cool.
announced, out on stage, and Jennifer gave me a big hug, and yeah, it was pretty special. And then the rest of the trade show, that 2.5 hours, I didn't, everybody was just coming by and saying congratulations. I was in a good
Cool, man.
mood. Yeah, it
Well,
was fun.
and I understand from talking to you at the Iowa convention in Des Moines, this is not your only Associate of the Year award. Apparently, you were collecting some hardware, man. So spill the beans. Where else have you been Associate of the Year?
The Minnesota Federation of County Fairs, they gave me their associate award. They call it the Meritorious Award.
Okay.
And I received that actually, I believe it was 2020, right? Early 2020 is they have January, they
Right.
have their convention. And, that was kind of a shocker. And then this past month, about, I don't know, was it 3 weeks ago now? The Wisconsin Association of Fairs gave me their Associate of the Year award. And that was, again, I had kids. In fact, my sister-in-law and her kids were there this time. And there they actually give you the microphone. And I couldn't
So
say
wait,
more.
IFE doesn't let you give a little speech like they do at the Grammys or
Oh
anything?
no! And thank God though, I would have just, yeah, I wouldn't have. I was
That
too
ain't
choked
right.
up.
That ain't right.
No,
Marla, Kate, Steve, if y'all are listening, you got to give the associates like, give us 30 seconds. Come on.
I wouldn't have made it 3 seconds, Robert. Wisconsin, I barely got out the words thank you, and the waterworks started coming a little bit, and I'm an emotional guy, and
Okay, so you got Minnesota and Wisconsin and IFE. Have you got any others?
no, that does it. That's
Three.
that's it. So
Three.
yeah, I got a
Marsha's
couple insurance industry awards, specialty broker awards, and that kind of stuff, but fair awards for you know.
no bragging though, right?
Well, I mean,
I
I,
think I always poke fun at your on Facebook when you post something and I'm like, wait, where's the award? What? No hardware in this picture? Come on, man. But I think it's a testament to who you are and the role you've played in the industry that you are not an above not above, but not like the in your face outgoing entertainer that does the 3 or 4 shows a day and ends up on the marquee. You're just the guy who quietly sits in the background and makes sure these fairs have what they need to protect themselves. And the fact that I think you're an upstanding dude. I think you're a really upstanding guy. I think you do really good work in the industry. There's no drama that follows you around. You're just a guy that anybody can roll up to and have a conversation with. And you do really good work at your job. And I think that these awards reflect that. So congratulations.
well, thank you. That means a lot, and I've never considered myself as a salesman and more of an educator.
Man.
And so if I can enlighten people and give them the information so that they can make the most informed decision possible,
Yep.
then I've really done, what I need to do. And everything else just kind of, takes care of itself. So
Yeah.
that's
I
really
mean,
what I
there's
see in my role.
There's certainly a lot of insurers out there that can provide weather and event cancellation insurance. Whether you all listening, if you're a fair, whether you end up going with Robert in Spectrum or not, at least give him a call. At least get some education and give him a shot to see. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you can guarantee you have the best rates, but you probably have got the best education, so that people can be informed buyers, and that makes their money go further and makes their investment a little worthwhile. Listen, we're just about out of time. Before we go, everyone who comes on the show, we do a little round of speed round questions. So I've got a few questions here for you. I'm going to ask the question. You give me your quick answer. Are you
All right.
ready?
Sure.
All right. Favorite fair food?
Corn dogs painted yellow with mustard.
Painted yellow. Very nice. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Do you wear cologne? If so, what kind?
Negative.
Negative. Okay, you can travel back in time to meet any historical figure. Who is it, and what do you talk about?
Sir Ernest Shackleton, and talk about his year plus journey of being stranded in Antarctica, locked in the ice, and then finding his way back and not losing a single member of his crew. He's an unsung hero that most people don't know about.
I've never even heard this dude's name, but the story sounds like it should be a movie.
It is a movie. I saw it about 5 years. Well, I didn't see it actually. I still need to see it. It came out about 5 years ago, but yeah, there's a whole before all this, I was an Antarctic researcher. And so
Man, you got some stories to tell.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Wow.
you want that could be another time you and I can sit down and
another
chat,
time we'll have you back on and
yeah,
we can talk about Antarctica. Wow.
yeah.
If you were okay, last question here. If you were given an all expenses paid trip anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I think I'd like to go to Finland.
Finland.
Finland,
Excellent.
yeah.
What if you were given an all expenses paid trip to Dayton, Ohio? Would you be
Dayton,
like,
Ohio?
yes?
Wow,
like,
that would
yeah.
be. I could tour the Goodyear factory, aren't they in Dayton, or is that the belts and hose place, Gates Hoses or something?
I don't know. My notes literally say insert random city name, man.
You know what though? I could probably make a trip of it because there's going to be a museum or some history there,
Or a
and
fair or something.
well, if it's the summertime, we'll do the fair. If it's the wintertime, we'll go to the RV show.
See, we in the fair industry, we've got it figured out. We're flexible. We roll with the punches. Well, man, listen, I've enjoyed having you on the show and getting know a little bit more about you and what you do. Folks, if you are listening, Spectrum Weather Insurance, Robert Holmes can get you covered. Robert, where can they find you to learn more about weather insurance and event cancellation insurance?
Well, the website is spectrumweatherinsurance.com, all one big long word. You can also email me at rholmes, like Sherlock, Holmes, rholmes at spectrumweatherinsurance.com. And, my phone number is on the website too. And probably you can look me up on your state's Fair Association's associate member list or the IFE list, or I can be reached a bunch of different ways, or you can swing by the house.
Yeah, just swing by the house.
We got plenty of room here.
I'm going to do that one of these times when I'm driving through, because you're Kansas City, right?
Yep, Kansas City.
So like this summer when I'm on my way up to Iowa for my Iowa run, I'm just going to knock on your door and be like, what up? You got any food? You got snacks?
I got a 20 by 50 slab with 50 amp shore power. You can just park, spend the night. Got laundry for you. You jump in the pool.
Done deal, man. Awesome.
Yeah.
Man, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show. To those of you listening, thanks for tuning in again to the Fair Game Podcast. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.